All right, well, we're about to start. And as I was just yelling out a second ago, I'd like to get everybody at tables with at least a couple of people at each table, because a big part of what we're doing tonight is going to involve a seminar in the middle of it, where you're going to talk about an opening question that my friend here, Chris Phillips, is going to ask at the beginning. And then we'll default to the tables for you guys to talk about the opening question. And then at the end, at roughly around 7, we'll go back to Chris, and he'll talk with you guys, discuss with you, ask questions about what you talked about at your tables. And it's kind of interesting to see how different tables have different issues and ideas and things that they discuss. So that's a fun part of the event as well. So my name is Paul Martin. I helped start this 11 years ago. This is our 12th Constitution event, a conversation with the Constitution. We're doing Constitution Day, which is today, for those of you that don't know, as a lot of Americans don't know that today is Constitution Day. But 1787, the Constitution was signed on this date. And so in recognition of that, we started this event 11 years ago. And the idea is to, take some time looking at the Constitution, discussing different aspects of it. Chris is going to introduce the opening question and give you some background on it here in a second. And I'm always happy to talk with people afterwards. If you have any interest in talking about next year, we're always getting ready for the next year. So be happy to talk with you about that at some point if you want to. And I think that's pretty much all I have to cover. Did I miss anything? Probably. Okay. Well, I may be back I will be back at the end, and I'll bring up whatever it is left to talk about. Okay. What's that? Oh yeah. Elizabeth Avalar here helps put this event together, and she's got an opening thought for the event. And then I need to introduce Charles over here too. I knew there was things I'd forgotten about that.
And our gracious tech team here, they're all volunteers, so please make sure to, yes, a round of applause to our AV team. Camera one, Sibyle, and then Malcolm, Sassy, remind me her name, Kali, and your name again? Naraya, camera 2. All right. And they're going to be looking around for action. I told them, look for action. We want to catch the drama. All right. So, okay, a couple of opening thoughts. Today, we come together with gratitude for this opportunity to connect, share, and grow. As we engage in meaningful conversation, may we be guided by love, wisdom, peace, and hope. Let us leave here encouraged, empowered, and enlightened with a renowned sense of purpose and connection to one another. That should be our goal today. Thank you all.
Now, I'd like to introduce Charles Maciate. He's helped put this together from the beginning. And let's just say a few words, Charles.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Liz. It's really important to me as a native of San Antonio to help facilitate this type of an event, this type of a program. That's inspired me to go into education full time. And I'd like to acknowledge a lot of my students here from Great Hearts Mount Vista who have joined us. If you don't know, Great Hearts Mount Vista is a classical liberal arts school. It's a charter school that's focused on great books, primary texts, and Socratic seminars. So this is all in their wheelhouse, and hopefully it's a wonderful event. We will ask them to distribute themselves amongst the tables, so you could have an experience with some of my students. And I hope that they don't hog the conversation. They need to be practicing awareness as well. But yes, we're celebrating that at our school. So I really appreciate everyone being here, and it's wonderful to see you again, Dr. Chris Phillips. Thanks.
I guess we'll leave it optional for the students. It looks like they want to stay where they are, Charles. Okay, all right, okay. Well, guys,
Come on, spread out.
if anybody wants, yeah,
So one come to my table, please, or two. Selfishly. Here's some space here.
we got one table here, guys. Anybody looking still? So we got, let's see, I'm gonna grab another chair and I'll join you guys. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we're gonna get rolling here. So Chris Phillips is an author, best-selling author, number of books, including one called Constitution Cafe. And we got this thing rolling when he was giving a presentation on his book, Constitution Cafe, for the Library Foundation. And I've been thinking about doing an event on the Constitution. And so I approached him afterwards and said, hey, you want to come back to San Antonio and do an event with me on September 17? And he said, sure. And so we've been doing it now this is our 12th one. So without further discussion, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you. What's your name? Oh, you're my daughter. Okay. The one who's giving me directions. Well, it is such an honor to be back for our 12th annual. Oh, you don't need it? I don't need it. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. What's he doing? And it's a microphone. Yeah. I don't get out much, so. Okay. So as long as you can hear me, my Southeast Virginia twang. I'm from Newport News, Virginia. My family immigrated there from a little tiny island in the South Aegean called Niçoros, Greece, when Mussolini's minions took over the island. And my yaya became the first Greek teacher of Greek language and culture after settling in the United States. But this is such a special gathering for me for many reasons. My father died under tragically unexpected circumstances 13 years ago on September 17th. So he, luckily I had given him an advanced copy of my Constitution Cafe book to read. And so I'd written a number of books celebrating Greek culture and tradition, but the book that he liked the most was Constitution Cafe. And so it was a real joy to me to know that he'd had a chance to read it before his very tragically unexpected death. And so I came and I spoke in San Antonio, and Paul, this very imposing, stately man, came up to me afterwards. And he had this idea. See, Constitution Cafe, my book, Jefferson's Brew for a True Revolution, was about these offbeat mini constitutional conventions that I held all over the fruited plain of the United States, asking people if they could make changes to the Constitution from the preamble on, Bill of Rights and everything. What would they change, if anything? And why? And we would sometimes come up with new articles, new sections in the preamble. The project stemmed from the fact that the Center for the Constitution in Montpelier did a survey of Americans. And they said, how many of you would like to change the Constitution? People aged 36 and over said they wouldn't change anything. People under age 36 said there were a bunch of things they'd like to change. But here's what they had in common. They hadn't read it. They hadn't read it. Some of them could recite the preamble because they had to do it in school many moons earlier. They hadn't read it. They hadn't read it. It's like 4,300 some odd words. And so that's actually when I got this idea of maybe this sort of offbeat way of exploring the Constitution is a way that we could start absorbing it, but also discover uncommon common ground and a greater appreciation of what our founders and framers did and achieved. Now, Paul did me many times better with his idea of conversation with the Constitution, which is, we're now in our 12th year, when he proposed that we take a look at specific areas and themes in the Constitution and just explore them together. And we all win just by sharing our passion views, making cogent, compelling reasons behind our views, but not feeling like we have to win the day. But as we listen carefully to what others have to say, that in and of itself can be transformative, just by really and truly, genuinely opening ourselves up to other points of view. And so this is our 12th year, and I'm deeply grateful to Paul. I've never met anybody who's so civic minded and conscious. Let's give it up for Paul. Now, my secret weapon in all of this is my wife, Cecilia. I met Ceci at one of my first Socrates cafes. That was my initiative that still, I began 28 years ago. Ceci came to one of my gatherings. She was the only one who came. I now tell her that she just shooed everybody else away. So, but this is my wife, Ceci, and we've been together now for over 28 years. Ceci. Absolutely none of this would be possible without Ceci. Yeah. And then this is the first time that my children have been to this gathering. This is my daughter, Sibylle. And she's going to kill me later, but my daughter, Callie. I'd like to also introduce Dennis Dienst, who came all the way from the Twin Cities of Minnesota to be part of this. Very dear friend. Thank Elizabeth Avlar, Charles Maciate, Kelly Vance. So many wonderful people I've been blessed to meet as a result of this. So there's always a kind of magic that happens. And I want to, Paul and his brother Jim have a really cool book coming out. I'm sorry, but I have to. It's just so cool. Reflections of Sins in Essence. It's coming out soon, and you have to grab a copy. I actually thought these were fragments from ancient Greek philosophers I've never heard of. That's how good it is. So I hope you'll grab a copy of it. It's coming out soon, and I'm going to plaster social media with things about it. And also, we have some people actually on taking part hybrid through Zoom as well. Roger Bryce isn't on hand by now, but that's a very long time. Socrates Cafe in Geneva, just outside of Chicago. Hi, Roger. Can you hear? Hey, everyone. And he's also a fabulous writer and thinker. Dr. Rob Carter. Rob, are you there? Rob. Rob is
yes, I'm here. Yeah.
What's your video?
I can't cut my camera on right now.
All right, that's okay.
But I'm excited to be here.
So Dr. Carter is chief of staff at Fort Detrick. He's an international best-selling author. He came out with a beautiful book called The Morning Mind, and his newest book is called The Bipartisan Jesus, and it's about how the messages from the Bible can help us in these times of pervasive polarization. And I'm just honored that he's taking part in this as well. And we've done a couple of exchanges recently on our Socrates Cafe YouTube channel. So we got a really great and diverse gathering, but the thing that makes these gatherings so special, as Paul and I discovered early on, is the brilliant minds of young people. And so that's what we're and so the theme this time on voting age is something very dear to me. Callie just turned 18, so she gets to vote for the first time in the presidential election. She's writing me in as a special write-in candidate for president. I don't think so. And my daughter, Sibylle, is also a really big impetus behind the theme that we came up with this year. When I presented the theme to Paul, he just goes, cool. And I knew we'd hit pay dirt for this conversation with the Constitution. And this is how this happened on the voting age. My daughter, Sibylle, made a very eloquent argument that she should be part of those who get to vote. Sibylle just turned 11. And because the argument is that, well, the Declaration of Independence talks about mankind. Isn't childkind part of mankind? Paul came up with a theory that if you can blow your nose, you should be able to vote. Is that yes? Is that true or not? Oh, yeah. Listen to him now. And so Sibylle, to her surprise and delight, I showed her an article that I wrote before she was born about my own arguments when I was a senior education fellow, the first ever at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, saying that at least young people should get to vote on matters that pertain to them, such as in schools. What might our gun laws be, education laws be, if children had, the people who have to go to those places had some input in those issues. When I first made that argument on a program that I was on regularly on public radio, they never had me back on the program again. I got to experience cancel culture before it became a thing. What, young people? They're so influenced. They're so easily influenced. And I said, oh, have you ever heard of this thing called negative advertising and their effect on adults in campaigns? Oh, they didn't want to talk about that. So I've heard some of the most eloquent arguments on any issue made by young people. I lock hearts and minds with young people. I need them. And I've argued that since my first book, Socrates Cafe, came out. They open my mind and heart up to new vistas and new portals. And so when Sibley made this very eloquent argument about lowering the voting age, I thought, well, this is a good chance to just talk about it. You know, agree or disagree or not even know if we have a point of view. Let's talk about it. Because voting age and voting rights go hand in glove. I'm going to read you a couple things. This one is from my book, Constitution Cafe. It's very short. And I write, in his first inauguration speech, Thomas Jefferson stressed that the suffrage of the people was a fundamental right. Yet most who supported the Revolutionary War were denied the right to vote in state, local, and federal elections. Only the state of New Jersey came close to granting universal suffrage. Who's here from New Jersey? Jersey? Ceci and I met in Montclair, New Jersey. Okay, so that was the only place where they came close to having universal suffrage, but even that was taken away in due time. Now, with the past, it really wasn't until the Voting Rights Act that Black Americans finally had the opportunity to vote, even though supposedly it was given to them to Black Americans. Long before that, it was almost impossible with polling taxes and all kinds of impediments put up. So they could. Women were not in the picture until August 18th, 1920, when they were finally granted suffrage. August 18th happens to be the birthday of my oldest daughter. So that's really cool. And so now it seems to me like it's something that we should talk about. The 26th Amendment lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. 18-year-olds are being drafted. Many of them fought. Many of them died in the Vietnam War, and yet they couldn't vote. They had no say-so in it whatsoever. And so finally, an amendment was passed that gave 18-year-olds the right to vote. It's arguably arbitrary, even though very compelling reasons were made about why we should lower it to 18 in the United States. In Brazil, the voting age is 16. There was a movement in Germany to lower it to 11. And again, a lot of older adults are aghast that we would even consider such a thing. You know, they're not up on the issues. You know, they're way too easily influenced. There's pros and cons and many things in between about that. But I think it's a very healthy exercise to at least ask ourselves, especially in a time when there's so much polarization. A lot of people don't think that their neighbors and their fellow Americans are informed citizens like they are. How do we become more informed about things? Would we be a more informed citizen?
We don't have an account.
If we allowed younger people to be part of it? Also, I don't know. Would we start putting funding again back into government programs in our schools? You know, government programs are almost non-existent these days in our public schools, or budgets are cut to the bone, or they're put into things like coding. But shouldn't we code for democracy? Shouldn't we have more government programs than ever? I don't know. But so my opening question today is simply, do you like the voting age as it is now with the 26th Amendment? Are you good with age 18? Should it be lower? And if so, should it be just a blanket thing or just for specific types of things maybe young people could vote on? Or should it be raised? Is 18 too young? Even though the reason that it was lowered to age 18 in the United States was because you can be drafted at age 18. I've been to other countries where kids who can vote actually think it should be raised to age 25, 26. They don't feel like they're ready to have that responsibility. So that's what the opening question is. Should we lower it, raise it, or keep it just as it is? And let's have at it, Paul, for about how long? Okay. Half an hour. And I'm gonna join y'all at a table over here. Okay, just. All right, you made a good speech for hours.
Hello. So the idea here in this portion is that we can talk about this, like how you feel about the question that Chris just posed. And so if you want to talk, we can just unmute ourselves. I'm gonna get my headphones, otherwise I can't hear.
Yeah,
Are we in a breakout group?
yeah, let me tell Pat, because you may want
I
to
would
step
guess so.
out if you want to talk to them, because they're gonna hear all the time.
Okay, so I'm gonna step out so that I can listen to you and you can listen to me, and then we'll come back
All right.
in a little bit.
Okay.
And would I have Wi-Fi there?
Yes.
All right.
We had trouble signing in. Can you repeat the question that you posed?
Okay.
The basic question was about
Okay,
voting
there
age.
was a
Should it be
cacophony there. Okay. So,
So let me just clarify. You're Ceci?
yes.
All right. Just want to make sure I'm Pat. Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I'm local. I live here in San Antonio. I would have been there in person, but my car broke down, and so I had to come on Zoom. So anyway.
I'm so sorry. Okay,
Can
so
you repeat the question, please?
so
What
the
word?
is if you feel that the Constitution should be like, should we keep the voting age at what it is right now, which is 18, or should we lower the voting age, or is it too young to vote at 18, and why?
Well, for me, that's an interesting question because frankly, it's one that I've never thought about that much. But now that I've given it 2 or 3 minutes thought, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I understand the statistics are only about 50% of our population votes in the first place. In the most important elections we have, the presidential election, half the people in the country don't even bother to come out. That's a real problem. Now, I don't know, maybe if we lowered it, say to 16, would that bring more people out? Probably would. But then I also wonder, is the argument that they're not that informed, is that a valid argument? But then on the other hand, by the way, I'm what you call a both and thinker, not either or. Most of the people, it's obvious to me when I look at the polls and look at what's going on today, half the country is not informed about anything. They don't know what's going on. So they're just voting insanely, in my opinion. So I don't know. I would probably be more interested in initiatives that could get the registered voters currently more informed and out to the polls. I think that would be more important than lowering the age.
Okay, well, that sounds great. But one of the things about Constitution Cafe is that that we'll try to stick to the question, but that is a wonderful point. And also
Well, my answer to the question then is no, I don't think the age, it should be lowered. I think something else should be done.
okay.
So no.
And why do you think that children or young
youth, I guess, shouldn't vote? Why not?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I think that they should not vote. And frankly, I wouldn't know where to draw that line. I could see lowering it to 16. I think there are a lot of 16-year-olds who think and well enough and who are informed enough. I'm not sure going below 16. He mentioned 11 years old. That's kind of a stretch.
You have to listen to my 11-year-old.
Yeah. So, I don't think I would be opposed to say 16.
Mm-hmm.
I might be opposed to going below 16 because I don't know, I'm arguing with myself. I was going to say because they're not well informed, but maybe if they knew they had the right to vote, they would become more informed. That the Constitution and our social issues would become more important to them than their iPhone. So
I feel like 18 is an appropriate age. You can join the military at 18. In most states, you can drink at 18. A lot of states. But I think going younger, there is so much influence from social media that it would be very easy for a candidate to lead them astray, or a celebrity to greatly influence an election if we were allowing younger than 18 to vote.
And do you think that would happen to adults?
Oh, definitely. But at least, I mean, they say that the brain isn't fully developed until, they're like in their early 20s. So going to 18, I think, is even, a little bit of a stretch. But if we're going to allow them to join the military and put their lives on the line for our country, it doesn't seem fair not to let them vote.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing celebrities right now influencing people greatly. As a matter of fact, might even swing the election because of Taylor Swift's endorsement.
Probably even people in their 30s and 40s,
Yes.
But I think if you lowered it to 16, it would be even more of an issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Roger, you wanted to say something, and then I want to hear from Dr. Carter as well.
Yeah, I guess I would like to know more about, when the amendment was passed to change the voting age to 18, we knew very little about the human brain. We know a lot more now about the human brain, about the executive function of the human brain. And Kathy alluded to the fact, I think the age they say is 25, when the executive function of the brain really begins to mature or fully mature. So my answer to the question really depends upon what do we know about the human brain and its ability to make cogent arguments and decisions. So I don't think it should be lowered. I'm wondering whether or not the age of voting should be raised based upon what we know about how the human brain functions. And I don't know enough about that to make that decision.
So I'm just wondering if that is the case, if we should also have other, other decisions to, I guess, other requirements to vote besides age. I mean, is the executive function argument the only argument that we should consider? Like, okay, so your brain is fully developed, therefore you can vote, even if you're not informed. I'm just being the devil's advocate.
Well, I think the requirement should be they can vote if they agree with me.
Right. Then civilly come vote. I'm just kidding.
Well, you know, I don't think that I I would be inclined if I were if I had to make a vote, make a decision, take a stance on that. I would pretty certainly vote to leave it as it is. Uh, and because even people 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and I'm 82, are ill-informed about our Constitution. And I know this is has to be a nonpartisan event, and I don't want to make it partisan, but our Constitution is under attack. Our Constitution is under attack, and people don't know it. They
Yes.
do not know when something that's clearly stated in the Constitution is just being ignored and they're voting for something else. So I'm not sure that would get any better if we had younger people voting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So, I think, you know, arguments, I guess, for maybe say Lorna, okay? So it will allow individuals to drive at the age, and I grew up in Louisiana. I think I started driving at 13, but that's a whole different. If you had a job in Louisiana growing up, you could actually get.
I think your sound is
So you
kind of
actually
Yeah,
muffled.
pay, and so in some states, you know, they allow a wide range of other important decisions. But I think, you know, since I wrote the book, The Morning Mind, which is about the brain, I guess arguing against that is that, you know, it's well documented that kids are between the ages of, say, 14 and 17, 18. They're greatly influenced by peer and social development. So I think you would see a lot more YouTubers and pop stars shaping the elections. And also well documented that, you know, that's your brain development to be able to make emotional decisions. You know, the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. Typically, you don't see a fully developed cortex until, you know, the mid-20s. I think age from a brain development perspective, I don't think 18 in itself, but if you look at just the, you know, say if you look at the percentage of the U.S. population between the age of 16 and 18, you know, right now, based on the current U.S. population of, based on the current U.S. population of 30 million, so 330 million, you're roughly talking, you know, somewhere between 12 to 13 million people, or 3.8% of the population. So if you look at how close some of the elections have actually been, you know, that's a large percentage of that population, you know, if disinformation and things could definitely be swayed one way or the other. And I think another aspect against it is that generally people go off, whether it's the military, go off to college, go off and do something else that may give them opportunities to be exposed to other things. So that may help accelerate that development. I can tell you the argument of 18 because they can serve in the military. You know, given I'm a colonel in the Army, I can tell you, you know, I may trust some 18-year-olds with a gun, but I'm not sure I would trust them with understanding the Constitution. But yeah, I think it's, you know, it's I would argue realistically, if we're gonna talk about it from social engagement, understanding what they're voting for, I would actually say the age should probably be increased to about 21, just based on mature development and other things. I would say after they serve about 4 years in the military, that they may be a little bit more informed. And figure folks go off to college, they're about 21, 22 when they graduate from college. At that point, most people have had some type of job, and they have more awareness. So I would argue that if it's about, informed about the Constitution and decision making, I would increase to 21.
Well, I have a granddaughter who just turned 13, and she's smart as a whip. She's a straight A student. She's alert, very smart girl. I've tried to talk to her about the election, what's going on in the election season, and really all she does is just parrot the views of her parents. So I'm not sure that would be that much different among that age group if they would just magnify the votes of their parents, the ones who had parents. But it gets really complicated. But I still would not vote to lower it, and I wouldn't vote to raise it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right.
Unless you can convince me otherwise.
No, that's great. The thing about this is that we're not trying to convince anybody or anything, just really listening to what others have to say and what is it that they bring into the table, what their arguments are, and their reasoning. So as Chris was saying at the introduction, one of the reasons why we chose this topic is because our 11-year-old was 10 then. There were elections in Mexico. I'm from Mexico, and we were spending some time there. And when the elections came, both of my girls say, look, these two ladies are just fighting. They're just fighting one another, and they're not listening to anybody, just like trashing one another. And that's not a very adult-like behavior. So,
good for her.
And then there was a third candidate who was very inclusive. His language was very inclusive, and he was talking about children and their future, and how he was going to consider their well-being when they, as to make decisions today that will affect their future, rather than what's happening the next 4 years, right? And so they both said, okay, since we cannot vote, would you vote for him? Right? And they just brought up this really good argument about why I should vote for him rather than for the two fighting ladies, right?
Yeah.
And I guess what Sibeli was talking about was, why is it that politicians only cater to adults' demands and their interests, and they don't consider the well-being of the youth and children? And if they knew that children had to vote, would they think about more about their future? So I'm just putting that on the table.
Well, I would say that in our current political situation, that one of the candidates is communicating at a level below 18 years old.
Oh, how about that executive brain? Does that apply?
I'm curious, though, maybe somebody can help me with this. Are they teaching the Constitution in our educational system now?
I think perhaps at high school level. I mean, I learned it because I became an American citizen. I'm originally from Mexico. So I had to learn a lot about the Constitution and how the government worked and the history.
Yeah.
Things that Chris didn't know, even though he's...
Yeah, I was about to... it's funny. My wife had to do it. She's originally from India, and you're right. If Americans to study what folks that are getting their citizenship had to study by the age of 18, then everybody will have a much better understanding of the U.S. government. But I just don't. It's taught. It's an elective, I think, in a lot of school systems, which should be alarming.
Yeah.
I don't know about today, but I think I may have taken it in middle school or high school. But I think it's something that we as born in American citizens take for granted. And so we've always felt like our democracy was secure and, not really probably given it the attention that we should. I suspect that citizens who became US citizens are probably more knowledgeable
Oh,
about
yeah.
our Constitution and the value of democracy than those of us who were born in the United States. We've taken it for granted, and that's really sad.
Yeah, I have a friend like that two of them who became citizens, and I was impressed with what they knew about our government. I I, I have a friend who's a lawyer, and we had a meeting the other day. He does a lot of work with zoning issues in the city, which is very contentious. A lot of anger and arguments around those issues. And I asked him, and I said, "How do you deal with negotiations when you have people who are so opposed?" He says he tries to argue from what he calls first principles. And he describes first principles as those basic underlying values that are shared by almost everybody. And if he can bring people together on those first principles, it's a lot easier. And so when I think about this argument that's going on today in politics, it's not being argued from first principles, which would be our Constitution. The arguments are around what I feel, my emotions, what I believe, what I want for me, not you, not for the country. And there's no connection to basic underlying shared principles, which in the political context should probably be the Constitution. But as I said before, when somebody just trashes the Constitution and basically says that's irrelevant, what the Constitution says, what's important is what I want and what I believe is right, that's just really troublesome.
Well, what's even more troublesome is the Supreme Court. A
That's
small
right.
group of individuals can't agree on what the Constitution says or how it
That's
should be
right.
interpreted.
Yeah.
So they can't do it at the level of education and experience that they are. It's kind of difficult to understand that the population in general doesn't understand the Constitution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Much less what they're voting for, perhaps. So, Dr. Carter, I want to ask you, so should we, since Pat mentioned the emotional part of it, of voting, right? Like we bring about our emotions, our, anger or whatever. Should we include an emotional intelligence component? One of the requirements for voting? I mean, it seems to me that age is not enough, right? Like we can say, oh, children are not influenced. I mean, they're influenced by their parents' decisions, or their executive brain is not well developed, or they don't have enough information. So how about adults? I mean, if we think those things about children, should we also talk about certain elements for adults to be able to vote?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, but I think that obviously, that would be interesting, but then I think that you would easily get into emotional intelligence, IQ, a wide variety of things that would probably wouldn't be agreed upon. But I think it is important for more education in general, about the factors that are common within our democracy. And that's something I talked about, in my recent book, Bipartisan Jesus. While it's title bipartisan Jesus really applies to sort of all religions, but it's really just looking at, I think from a moral justice, the founding principles, right? The Ten Commandments, just the basic principles that we value as important, using that as a framework for decision making, as opposed to just partisan politics. Because I think your question about emotional intelligence would easily begin to fall within partisan politics. But I think it is an interesting aspect. And I think one of these from this conversation is that, there are definitely folks that are 14, 15, that are much engaged, in the issues, understand the nuances more than maybe some 30, 40, 50-year-olds that are voting. It's just become complicated when I think the preponderance of that of the population may not necessarily be informed. But I think that's really, it speaks across the spectrum, because I think that a large percentage of the population are not necessarily voting, even with their own, what they would generally place as their own moral principles. If you recall, there was a period of time when, someone that had been married and been divorced would not have been considered a candidate. Someone that definitely, not getting into politics, but someone that had publicly, had an affair, adultery, would have been thrown out. There's a lot of things that we accept now from candidates that we just would not have accepted when I was a kid. And I think many of those were founded and based in basic principles. Really, we're a Judeo-Christian nation, and a lot of our values, principles, and everything were based on those. And we judged, even though we all recognize that nobody's perfect, but at least from the folks that we put in position to represent us, we wanted them to at least represent as much of those values as possible. But I would say now that's not the case. And so I just wonder, throwing more people in that mix. I'll stick to not lowering the age, but if we throw more people into that mix, I think we're just throwing more people into a meat grinder, so until we clean some of that up, and I think it becomes complicated. I'll stop there.
I like your bipartisan Jesus, because I've just begun to study Jesus at this late stage of my life. And I quickly realized that Jesus was always bipartisan. And Jesus accepted everybody. And, if Jesus came back and you wanted to look for him, you wouldn't look for him in the boardroom of the biggest corporations. You'd go to the worst side of town. You'd go to the homeless people. That's where he'd be hanging out, helping the least of us. And so I think that we're all unmoored from some of those basic fundamental principles, because I'm not trying to preach or anything, because I'm not qualified to do that, but we know statistically people are leaving the church. And so there's a spiritual vacuum in this country, and people are not connected to some of those. For instance, I was reading today, I was studying that it occurred to me, that everybody knows that Jesus said, love your enemy. And I'm saying, what the heck does that mean? What does love mean in the context of your enemy? And half the country is viewing the other half as an enemy these days. How do I love some of these people that I find to be absolutely disgusting? And I asked myself that question for my own benefit, because if I allow myself to be sucked into hate, revenge, and retribution, and I try to match it with my own hate, revenge, and retribution, I'm not doing anything to help the society. I'm hurting myself. I'm corrupting myself. And the more I think about it, that love is the only solution. But to tell you the truth, I don't know how to make that work in my life. And I'm trying to figure out how do I love somebody? And I understand it doesn't mean romantic love, doesn't mean you got to hang out and have a beer with them. But how do I deal with that and get past this total disgust and yeah, a little bit of hatred that I feel for some of the things that I hear in the news today?
I think they're
I don't have an answer.
this portion of the event. So if you want something else to say before we go back to perhaps joining the big group, is there anybody who would like to say something else? Okay, I'll go back to the room and yes, thank you so much. We'll continue.
Okay, we're going to give you 1 minute, 2 minutes, wrap it up, more than 2 minutes. And close here.
Okay, so we have 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes. Yeah.
Pat, a favorite author of mine, Meg Wheatley, once said, "It's impossible to hate a person whose story you know."
That's true. I've read that. Yes, indeed.
I love that thought because I fall into that same trap of how could I possibly love a person, whose life I just don't understand, and the answer is you need to try to understand their lives.
Yeah. And that means you got to at least put aside some of your biases and prejudices and listen to them. And that's desperately needed in this political world.
I'm sorry, did you say something?
Obviously, you guys are with Chris. He's going to be with everyone. What you talked about at your tables. I will say that our team did come up with a solution, which I'll be happy to talk about in a minute when Chris wants to address it.
All right, so let's start. How did it go? Did you have a good conversation, everybody? Yes. All right. All right, let's start here. Can somebody sort of give us a little bit of a rundown of what y'all talked about, or did you come up to any conclusions?
All right, so we have a consensus around 18 years of age with some caveats, which has to be if they're in the military, shouldn't do that, sorry. If they're in the military, that would be, they could do it at 18, but maybe at 21 you are better ready to understand what you're doing. And that may be something to move, something to do. 2 other pieces, maybe we do 16 because there's a fair amount of what we do that we have privileges that start at 16. Maybe that's it. But then it is, how do we keep them informed? How do we know how to do that? And for me, maybe at 18, but for me, there needs to be civics put back into school.
To be civics. But also, how old are you? So what do you think? Do you think you're ready to vote? No?
Nope.
Do you think do you have civics education?
No.
Do you have civics education in your school?
I think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
So you don't have so.
Mm-mm.
If you, what do you think 21 is a good age? 18?
I think 18 is a good age. Yeah.
Because how old are you?
I'm 16.
16. What do you think?
I think that it should be raised to 21 unless you're in the military and fighting for your country, then you can vote at 18.
All right.
Let's go to another. Let's just keep going around.
Okay. Anybody over here want to say a few words?
Hello. So I would say for the voting age,
For the village, I'd say, it maybe it will not matter. Maybe it would just be, based on the respect we have for our country and our people. Sorry.
That's good. Thank you for that. Anybody else on this table want to, what did y'all, I saw you nodding your head. So in agreement, right?
We talked, of course, we kind of talked across the two issues. One is, are you really old enough to go to war when you're 18? And the other side of it was, maybe it wouldn't hurt to kick it up a little bit to maybe 20. But ultimately, it had to do with the breadth and knowledge, of our experience, no matter what age we were, and that we all needed each other, whatever age we were, and that we need to respect each other and to respect our opinions, everybody's opinion.
Okay. Before we go to more of the, let's just give a hand up for these fellows. Let's come back, before we go to more presential in person, let's go to our virtual participants. Ceci, what did y'all come up with? Robert Carter, Roger Bryce, Pat Whitty, Kathy Naughton. What did y'all come up with?
How do you want to share?
Yeah, well, we had a really lively conversation. Now, I mentioned to the group, you see, I'm what you call a both and thinker as opposed to either or, which makes what I say very confusing sometimes because I tend to walk back and forth. So I see all sides of an issue. But we talked about, maybe lowering the age to 16. And some people say, well, they're not well informed enough at 16. They don't know what's going on at 16, which I question that. But maybe if they were given the right to vote, that would be an incentive to take a more active interest in civics. I'm a little bit concerned about what the young lady said when asked if they teach civics in school now, and she basically said no. And I'm just wondering if they've taken civics out of all of our education, which is really concerning, that we're bringing people through high school and into college with no knowledge whatsoever of our Constitution. I don't know if that's a fact or not. So the consensus of our group, I think, was pretty much, while we can see advantages to lowering it, we can see advantage raising it. Basically, we just leave it as it is and not mess around with it, and concentrate more on helping the people, the 50% of our population who does not bother to vote at all, maybe to try to get them more informed and get them to take a more active part. And then finally, I just mentioned I have a 13-year-old granddaughter who's very bright. She's a straight A student. And I try to talk to her every once in a while about what's going on with our election year. And basically, she just parrots what her parents think. That's pretty much what she does. So I think lowering the age to 16 or 11 or whatever, we would just be magnifying the vote of the parents, the ones who fortunately have parents. I don't know if I covered everything. You guys might have something else. We talked about a lot of things.
Say anything? Dr. Carter, Roger, Kathy?
No, I think he hit it. It's I think he summarized it very well. That we had a great discussion, and we largely keep it the same and try and increase that number of informed voters, right? And so however that whatever that means.
The only other thing we talked about was, what do we know about the function of the human brain at this point that we didn't know? And the constitutional amendment lowered the age to 18. We know a lot more about how the human brain functions and the executive function of the brain, the prefrontal cortex and so forth. And I would like to know more about how the brain functions before we decide at what age we let people make significant decisions based upon the executive function of the brain.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. All right. Let's put out. Now, get this table. What did y'all decide, or what didn't you decide, or?
I basically said like 21 because we have 21-year-olds have more like, how do you say it, like they have more freedom, like they have more rights, like more like they can drink now, or they have more like responsibility than an 18-year-old. That's what I think.
Okay. Anybody else want to say anything? Yes. Okay.
I think it should stay at 18, but of course it depends on the generation. Like 50 years ago, a 16-year-old could be well informed to vote because he will be more mature. But it depends on the generation, because like in this one, a 6-year-old would, I don't think they will be matured to vote. But it depends on the generation.
Thank you so much. Come over to this table. Anybody got a microphone here? Yeah, spokesperson.
I'm Florence Kyle. I feel that most of what each table has said has been a general conversation for us four. I mean, each experience that you have changes your outlook on what you should do for your country. And social media is a huge problem because we are being told so many different things and we don't know what's true and what's not. So how we are influenced changes. So, I mean, I agree with him. I don't know your name, but it does really depend on the generation and each advance that we make as I suppose as a human species generally.
Okay.
So, interfacing with the foundational documents and the text themselves. Now, we could still actually have a full civics course with the public and the community with the things that they're interfacing with. So it's civics class. The absolute essential documents of Western civilization. So,
thank you, Chairman.
My name's Gregorio Martinez. You can just call me Greg, so that way you don't tie your tongue. Yes, my opinion about voting would just to be honestly keep it where it is. I like what you brought about generation. I've never heard that argument before, so that's a new one for me. But I think a lot of what voting is on now is just what benefits the single person the most, or just whatever society conforms to. Voting as a whole should be based more upon the future of our country more than just what we want. Because I think the kids are the future of the country, and nowadays marketing and everything goes towards the government somehow, right? Marketing, advertisement, that all somehow finds its way to kids. And And I do believe that I don't know how many generations are to come. I don't know when the end will finally arrive for all of us someday. But our future is very important, and I think that if we don't keep our future at the utmost importance, then we won't even have a country one day. So, way that we vote, we should at least have some knowledge of what we're voting for, the policies we're voting for, the reason why we're doing it, not just because we want to vote in one way or the other, but an actual understanding, like an independency of voting. We are founded on independence, so we should at least be an independent voter, all of us.
Yeah. So wait a second. So Greg, how old are you?
15.
So I'm wondering, because civics education is being cut out of many, if not most schools. Do you think if we lowered the voting age, then it'd be almost incumbent to suddenly have fully funded civics education again, like we did when I was your age?
Well, to be frank, I actually don't know what civics is because they never mention the word.
Issues, current events, political issues.
I feel like even if public schools were to teach civics class again, if we were to lower the age, it would still be somewhat in a bias towards the popular opinion rather than I guess the more important one, right? We tend to favor what goes than more what goes against, right? And sometimes what going against is honestly the better option. Even if we were to lower it, too many kids are influenced by their parents and too influenced by social media, like Miss Kyle was saying. Social media has a big factor on people in general. I mean, you hear kids just say this about a person just because they heard it, and now their opinion is fact because it was on the internet. So, I mean, I don't think kids at the age that we are have that capacity to actually make their own decisions in some way.
Anybody else want to say something? Go ahead. Thank you so much, Greg.
Sorry, I'm on speaker.
Okay.
Sorry.
They can't hear you.
Can you hear me? No. All right. Oh, I hate it. All right. Hello. Okay. So my name is Manise. I was somewhat indifferent to this conversation before I heard it start and entered in. And I would just say this, I personally now am pro lowering the age. I think we have placed undue justice and a lot on our children's plates, facing things like school shootings, human rights or women's rights, that we ask them to be responsible for, but then don't give them a platform to make any effective change. And then the one thing I've heard across the tables, and Roger on screen pointed out, was this idea of like functionality, brain capacity. And I would just challenge, instead of talking about how young someone should be to vote, should we put a cap on how old you should be to vote? Because if we're going to functionality, and not just telling a young person you don't have the means to make a responsible decision, that goes two ways. So that was kind of our consensus, but we had a very wonderful conversation. It was the greatest conversation you could ever have. And we really just felt that across all of it, we want to see more conversations of policy happening between people to inspire a political system that better represents us.
Thank you so much. Let's go over here.
Who wants to start?
So, our group was talking about keeping the age to vote like 18 because well, we were talking about like people at 18 now. Sorry, wait. I'm completely blanking. Sorry. You're saying how some 14-year-olds have the mental capacity of um 18-year-olds, but some 18-year-olds can have the mental capacity of a 14-year-old. Generally, so we were saying it depends on the intellectual ability of the person voting and understanding the true problem in the government and who's the best for helping the government thrive. And then you're also saying schools should have classes for 18-year-olds to find a better understanding for the problems in government and like government classes.
It's, thank you. What's the general consensus? What? That you should keep it as it is? Lower it?
So we were saying keep it as it is. 18, yes.
Thank you so much. Anybody else wants to talk?
Oh, and because
Why did you say keep it at 18?
so he said, why did we keep it at 18? We were saying at 18 you're able to fight for your country. So isn't it self-evident that you should vote for your country if you're able to fight for it?
Anybody else?
Before you move on, Raya also has something to share.
All right.
Yes.
The lady behind the camera.
Wait.
I would like to say that I would want to hire it instead of keeping it the same because 18-year-olds, well, some 18-year-olds might not have the same exact education that an 18-year-old should have because either they can't afford it or they just can't learn it. So I would hire it to like 23 because when you're 23, it's like better than the bottom ages because you know what to do by then because you lived to be an adult for like 2 years or maybe 3. So you know what it like feels like to be an adult, so you know what to do when you vote. So I would change it to 23. That's my argument.
Thank you so much. All right. Now, moving to our table.
Okay, who wants to start first? Anybody want to comment?
So when our discussion ended, our table came to a consensus that the voting age should be lowered to 16 and they should take a proper civics course to have a voting test to vote. But after going around and hearing everyone's opinion, I actually changed my own argument and disagree with that. I think it should be raised to be 18 and over or 21. Because as some of my peers have said of how the youth or in the it's based off the generation, but also just how the youth is very impressionable based off all these distractions that we have around us, such as social media or other peers that are around us. I think it should be raised to enough where a individual can make their own opinion based off what they truly believe in and not what the most popular opinion is.
Thank you so much. Then, Sibley, I'm going to get to you.
Hello, my name is Stacy. I currently live in the Middle East, so I'm exposed to a lot of different governments. In the United States government, we have every tool we need to make this the best country in the world, and we pretty much are. When everyone needs help, they call us. However, the voting age, I believe, should be 18. If you can go and die for your country, you should be able to vote for your elected officials that make you go and die for your country. So my son had just joined the military at the Merchant Marine Academy, and thank God he can vote this election cycle because we need a lot of changes in this country. I see different things around the world, from socialist medicine to dictatorships to kings and queens. And really, everyone needs to get more involved in the voting process. And it should, in my opinion, be 18, because if you can die for this country, you better be able to vote for this into the war.
Thank you so much.
My name is John Banks, and when we started the conversation, I was okay with the voting age being at age 18 as it is now. I was changed at the time when I was close to 18, and it made a difference with the Vietnam War and people being drafted to go vote, to be able to vote before they got the draft. But discussions are going through 16, but there's some kind of education about civics or voting and things like that, as suggested on the table.
Thank you so much.
Before I get to my daughter,
I was at this table.
Can I make an additional comment from the Zoom? Just a quick comment from Zoom.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you first. Can you hear me?
Second.
Let's wait a little bit.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for making this conversation available, but especially for the intergenerational aspect of it. You know, we don't interact too much with other generations. And I'm at 82. I really enjoy listening to these younger people. And I want to especially comment on Gregorio, because my thought was, when I saw that T-shirt that Gregorio was wearing to proudly display how firmly grounded he must be at the age of 15 in some very important principles, I'm really impressed. I'm impressed by all of these younger people. And I think it's a great opportunity to have this intergenerational connection.
Amen.
So I got the white table and we got the green two line. I just want to it wasn't, I don't think it was mentioned, but one of the reasons that we also thought 16 at my table, at least a number of us, not everybody, was because you can start driving at 16. And the idea was, if you can take a driver's ed course and get in a car and potentially get on the highway and be responsible for driving responsibly and not killing somebody, maybe if you take a course on voting, you should be able to vote. And so that was part of our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Let me get a couple more people in here. Do we have a little more time? We have a little. First, I see my friend since middle school, Shep Shaw, and his wife Becky. We've known each other for 52 years. Shep, we went to Carver Intermediate School in Newport News, Virginia, in the days of the height of the desegregation era. Shep, what do you think? Were we ready to vote back then? Or we had civics education, we had government classes, and now they're cutting those things out. What do you think?
Yeah, they're cutting that out, but I do think that civics class, as I've heard from the other attendees, that's one of the things that should be kind of required, to understand the government that you're voting for or against, to at least have some perspective before you vote. And if you don't, then what are you voting for? It's not just the person, it's, you know, what the structure that you're looking for a solution. So
thank you so much. Give it up for him. And the reason that we're having this in the first place is because of Sibylle, who came up with the idea. Sibylle, do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, as many people here have said in this room, most of us want to lower the voting age to 16. Some want to keep it at 18. Some want to higher it to like 21 or 23. What I say that I've heard about two people say in this room is that according to your intellectual abilities, for example, well, yes, as you were saying over there, yeah, I mean, a 16-year-old can have the intellectual abilities of a 16-year-old, an 18-year-old, of a 20-year-old maybe. And many people haven't really thought of that yet. And I think that according to a person's abilities, we could learn to, I don't know, in a certain way, accommodate it to what each person needs and feels and what their abilities are and capabilities are.
Out of the mouths of them. Ceci, you wanted to say something? Ceci, thank you, Ceci, for helping orchestrate the video and everything and facilitating that, by the way.
My pleasure. So yeah, so something that I shared with my group on the Zoom was that there was elections in Mexico. I'm from Mexico, and my daughters, Callie wasn't 18 yet when the elections came up, and so civilly and Callie were telling me, "Hey, these two ladies are just fighting." It's like. Perhaps if they knew that we young people were listening, perhaps they would be more like responsible and responsive to us underage people, and perhaps they will listen to what we need, what our future is going to look like, rather than how they want to change government. How about our future? Who's listening, and would they be more responsible and implement policies that includes us? And so they convinced me to vote for the third person who was more inclusive, and was like talking more to all genders and children and youth and their future, and how that would affect the policies that they implement today, so that it will have an impact on their future. And Dr. Carter was talking about emotional intelligence, and how and Pat was saying that sometimes we made the decisions to vote based on how we feel, if we're angry against that, or rather than an intellectual decision. So I didn't share this, but my thinking is that that everybody, before like a requirement for voting, just like it's not just being registered to vote, but that you have to go through certain education on what you're gonna be doing. Just like when I became a U.S. citizen, I had to learn all these things about the U.S. Constitution and the history and the government. And, I was tested for that, which most Americans don't even know because they were just born here. So how about when we, get the right to vote, we get educated into what is it that we are gonna do.
Okay, thank you so much. I know.
Regardless of age. What? Regardless of age.
All right, there's a couple more people, then we'll wrap it up. Over here, Paul.
I'm Francis. I'm going to be more. My original opinion in the group was a little bit more extreme. Like, I pretty much believe that everyone should be able to vote no matter what age. Actually, however, you should have. You have to be able to pass a test, a civics test, competencies such as understanding the Constitution, how local governments work.
logic, that you can see both perspectives of the argument and different things like that, different core competencies like that, just so you can, like I said, like y'all have beautiful arguments about there's people at different ages or more advanced to other ages, people at other ages, based off generation. Well, so I think that that's something you teach starting at elementary school, these basic core competencies in middle school and high school, and based off pass it, doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Everybody, this is beautiful.
What this also is, though, is we show that, people with very disparate views can have at it in a thoughtful, impassioned way, agree or disagree. We might hate somebody's viewpoint, but not hate that person. In fact, love that person deeply. And it's always beautiful, as Pat said, when it's intergenerational, as I learned so much from everybody, especially including young people. And it's a real gift for me. And I just want to thank Paul again for making this a reality every Constitution Day. And I know my dad is looking down and so happy that we're having this today. Thanks.
We'll wrap up by thanking Chris. He always does a great job visiting with everybody and put this together and make it happen. And just a reminder, 1 year from now, September 17th, Constitution doing this again. So you can join us at that time as well. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. And did you want to say something, Elizabeth?
You can make sure that we have your email. You can either write it. There's a QR code out there. That way we can also hear from you as to what you liked and subject for next year, right? So we can give us ideas and you can stay in the know as to when we're having this next year. We might have it at different venues. So there's a QR code.
Awesome.
And we also have there's thank you notes. Thank you to a lot of people that made this happen. There you go.
Good. We'll take slides that was mentioned. So just to wrap things up here, then, what we're going to do now is feel free to hang out for a little bit longer. Saw the fair amount of food and drinks over there, so help yourself. If you want to have bags, take home bags. Some bags if grab some stuff and bring it home. And thanks for being here tonight, and hope to see you next year.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining.
It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just so you know, Chris was saying hello to you from the other screen, thinking that you could see him. So. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Hi, Seb.
So we will be sharing this recording. If you're interested, you can just drop me your email if we don't have it, but otherwise, most of you, we have your email.
Okay. Right, bye.
Bye. Oh, so Robert Carter's daughter is on the street.
Where is he?
Well,
Let me come back here.
There's going to need to be art.
no, he said.
Hey, Rob, thank you so much for taking part. Hi, Raj. I was going to put Raj on the spot, so. One of the guys can they hear me?
If you come closer, they can. Hi, Raj. Chris was saying that he was gonna put you on the spot.
So you could.
So that we could hear what you have to say. Oh, she loves that. Okay.